Hello, I'm Susan Elliott, the news editor of Musical America. Today we are talking to Anne Parsons, who has been the president of the Detroit Symphony since 2004. The orchestra was the very first to put its live concerts online, and so was a bit ahead of the curve when the pandemic struck. In the meantime, they've come up with a whole bunch of other ways to get to the public. So it will be interesting to find out what they are. I know you were ahead of the curve with the streaming because you've been doing it since when, 2011, something like that?
Yep.
And so when it first hit and you couldn't get back in the hall, tell us what happened.
Well, Susan, the Detroit Symphony is not any stranger to challenges and to moments like this. And we just felt that there was the need to gather our resources in a very clear and collective way. And that means the board, the orchestra, the staff, the stage crew, bringing everyone together and deciding what risks we're going to possibly be, that we were possibly going to be facing, and decide how to stabilize what was clearly going to be a very difficult time. I mean, we didn't know how difficult, we didn't know for how long. So we called our first 6 weeks kind of the stabilization period, where we looked at how do we get to August 31st, which is our fiscal year? What happens if we didn't have any live performances, which at the time we thought, oh, well, that could never happen, but what if? So we took a conservative approach. And at the very same time, we set up an innovation committee from the beginning with musicians and staff working together to figure out what can we do, while the other group was working on how do we make adjustments. And between the two, we started to act quickly right away. So from an artistic point of view, that's when we opened up replay free to everyone. And it had been a very nominal fee to access our archives. But we went from, something like 1,300 average views per month to something like 70,000 views per month, just by opening up our archives and providing music as a resource to people who were missing it so terribly. So that was a big part of what we did to begin. And then the musicians started going really creative on how they could provide new content from their living rooms or from their porches when it got nicer. So we started a From Your Porch series, or on Your Porch series, which was also something that was going on around virally, and we really went after it. One of the things that I would say is that we definitely leaned into our digital and virtual space that we have lived in all these years and leveraged it. And it has worked really well for us. We did have in August, I didn't say this, lots of outdoor events, from backyards and front yards and parks to our very own courtyard, which is called the Sosnick Courtyard. And we did a number of events there, from yoga to jazz to classical to film. We were operating sort of all the time to socially distanced, masked audiences who were very grateful that we were there.
And were the musicians sort of rotating? And did people volunteer? And did the people who didn't feel comfortable performing stayed home and collected a full salary anyway? It was all the same, or?
We have a do no harm philosophy around procedures and protocols. And so we surveyed our musicians early on, probably multiple times throughout the last fiscal year. What would you be comfortable doing? Right. And that changed over time. I think we got to a point where in August, we were literally ready to go with these new concerts. And we said, okay, our new music director, Jader Bignamini, is coming back from Italy. He's going to be here for 2 weeks. We're going to split the orchestra, no more than 30 people on stage. You will not be on stage at the same time. We will use masks. We did an aerosol test. We have testing of every individual before they come in the building on a week-to-week basis. So and lots of other protocols in the building. We had a whole team of people who work on our building because, of course, we own Orchestra Hall and we can control everything. So we did as much hands-free as we could. Our stage crew is amazing, just amazing, taking care of everything, every little detail. So we learned who was willing to perform. And then, of course, those that didn't want to perform live would continue to do virtual work.
And so the musicians at this point were still on full salary, or how was that breaking down?
Good morph to the other group that was working. We worked with the board and the musicians and the stage crew and their representatives to figure out what were the losses that we knew we were going to experience financially. What were the savings for not doing concerts? What were the risks in fundraising, and obviously the risks of ticket revenue that we had in the bank that we didn't know how people would behave relative to wanting refunds or whatever. So we created a plan, and the plan was based on shared sacrifice and a real open collaborative spirit, and we came to an agreement really quickly with everyone. The stagehands and the musicians all took a sort of across the board cut. I did as well. And then with the staff, depending on how much they were making to begin with and how much their job was affected by not having concerts in Orchestra Hall or out in the community, or so that we looked on a more one-by-one basis.
So tell us about the protocols and how you came up with them and how the first concert went. I guess you're in the middle of a second group of them right now.
Right now, they are available to donors and subscribers for their investment in us at this time. So people who did not ask for their money back and who said that they would donate their tickets for concerts that were lost, they get this content for free. So we started with who could be on stage, and our stage crew mapped out what he thought a socially distanced orchestra could look like at a maximum. And then there were shields built that were new. We've always used modestly shields in our orchestra. Really, Orchestra Hall has never really required it, but we've put some great big glass shields up, or plexi shields up. The agreement was to wear masks whenever possible. And we are certainly working in smaller groups, just winds, just brass. We're using the hall itself. We may be using the hall more, where some of the musicians are in the balconies. And so on Monday, they come in for testing. They get an appointment. They go to the third floor of our parking garage, where we have a partnership with the Henry Ford Health Systems, and everybody gets a test. On Tuesday, we get the results, and on Wednesday, we have our first rehearsal, and on Thursday, we have our first performance. Friday, we have our second performance, and then that orchestra rotates off.
I was curious about the, again, the ventilation system in the hall, if that is, was that already up to speed, or did that have to be revisited? Or
good news, when we went to test it, we did a little smoke test, and
saw that
the fumes went up and they went up and they went over.
That is very cool to watch. I mean, it literally just went up.
I have to tell you, we were all holding our breath because no one knew what was going to happen, and we were thrilled.
Yeah. So tell me about going forward. You must have about 15 different scenarios planned. Sounds to me like you guys have got it all figured out, whatever it might be. How are you thinking about the spring? So your plans through December, is that right?
We made a plan through December 31st.
Right.
And we are beginning to look at January to March right now. We're taking it in chunks. That would be 1 year from closing. And I think, at this point, it's still September. The question of whether our country can get this pandemic under control is really the question. And if we could manage the cases, if we could all pledge to put health and safety of everyone first, ahead of every other priority, I'm going to leave it at that, then I think we could be managing the spread. And then I think we could be seeing a return to audiences in Orchestra Hall. At this moment, we're not counting on it, but we are prepared for it. And we are also prepared for being able to expand the number of musicians on stage. But again, we're not going to count on it.
What is that number now?
So right now we have 30 in our minds on the stage itself, which could be expanded if we used more of Orchestra Hall. The balconies, for example, come quite close over the stage.
Right.
The house is right there. But we've stuck to the idea of 30 right now.
And I noticed somewhere in one of your press releases that initially you negotiated with everyone, or with the musicians anyway, through the end of August. And so I'm assuming that you did get a PPP loan and all that, or did you?
So around the time we were actually concluding our discussions with everybody about how would we get to a break-even year, and we created some guardrails and some guideposts for ourselves with the board's help and the musicians' agreement. And again, we treat our stage crew as part of the family. So we put these things together, and one of the things that we all said was we had to not take any money from our endowment. We wouldn't convert any, because we're in a campaign. So no endowment gifts would be flipped. We would not use next year's cash. We have lots of multi-year gifts and people who pay in advance. We wouldn't touch that money. We would do everything we could to not touch next year's ticket sales. And at the end of the year, we do have a line of credit, and usually we use it. And we were fully drawn on our line of credit that by August 31st, we would pay down our line of credit. So we knew at the end of the day, we had to have a surplus to get to even. And without the PPP loan, we would never have gotten there. But thankfully, we did get it. I have to say, our culture of participation, shared participation around deepening relationships has been something that has built since 2012. When we had probably our hardest time culturally as an organization with the strike.
Right.
Yeah. With a commitment to make sure that relationships were a priority, that people came first, that empathy and connection and transparency would be at the top of everyone's values list. Mm-hmm. And we just, so musicians started working with our development team years and years and years ago. And they have always volunteered to play in people's homes, and something called musical feasts where we could sell tickets and raise money. But yes, definitely during the pandemic, everything from birthday and anniversary messages with video attached to phone calls to letter writing.
What about the staff? Have they been also doing different kinds of things? I mean, are you still at pretty much full staff, or are you?
So we did a restructure for starting September 1st, knowing that there were certain jobs that really weren't just going to be needed. Yeah. And so we did eliminate certain positions, and it was part of the cost cutting requirement too, is we had to bring our costs down, and we knew that if we eliminated certain positions, we would not have to cut the salaries of the working staff quite to the degree that the musicians and the stagehands were cutting theirs.